some common things that I find when talking to vegan people is that lack of energy, lethargic, lack of body composition, struggling to gain or lose weight or just change your composition at all. Whatever reason you have to eat vegan, whether it's you feel healthier or if it's because you want to protect cute animals, whatever it is. I mean,
if it's ethical, like I get it. Like,
my just thing is you can't have the best of both worlds, and you can't be vegan and also be optimized
you just have to be a little bit more precise with it. You're going to take that diet and you have to hone in to make sure you're still getting your protein, your carbs, your fats.
And you're also got to take 17 supplements. Welcome back to Optimized by Jeffrey Delaney. Today, we are going to be breaking down from a 30,000 foot view, very high level of the most popular 6-7 diets that are going on in the world today. We're going to break down the carnivore diet, keto, intermittent fasting, vegan, paleo, and the Mediterranean diet. So Jeff, thanks for coming on and doing this. Let's start with what I would argue is probably the most popular and most controversial, vegan. So let's kind of break down the pros and the cons of a vegan diet, and we'll start there.
So that's a tough one for me to talk about. I love protein. Yeah. I love meat. But I'll tell you, there's a ton of health benefits. You know, kind of before we even get into the dieting styles, I feel like, you know, certain diets over the years become coined as the best dietary plan, or this is the one you should be doing, or, hey, you need to be following carnivore. And it's almost like everyone gets very cultish in their dieting styles. Like the vegan vegetarians like are over here freaking like, F you carnivore people, you know, and then you have the person over here who's like paleo is better. And they're like, nah, Mediterranean's better. And you're going to die because of A, B, and C. It's like, they all have benefits, but they all have some short deficiencies in them. Right. And it's like any diet could be good or bad. And honestly, like I've seen good plans get turned into shit plans because America does what they want to do. And we'll talk about that with some of the diets, but with vegan, vegetarian, you know, that's going to be a diet that's going to be mostly plant-based, restricting all animal type products. You know, you pretty much are going to have, you know, you still have some fruit, in there, vegetables, very little dairy, you know, so it's very restrictive. It's very kind of low, I guess, inflammation if you want to take it. But some people don't tolerate vegetables that well. Like, you know, the FODMAP side of things can cause like gas and bloating. So it just depends on the person. But pro, I would say like you don't have the animal cholesterol that comes in that could potentially mess up someone's cholesterol. You have, you know, very little protein though in that type of diet. It's hard to get the protein requirement you need if you're an athlete. Yep. You know, I've seen the Game Changers documentary, and unfortunately those are somewhat biased. You know, they like showed, you know, this person that was a vegan athlete versus a person that was, you know, more protein based, and the person that was on the vegan vegetarian actually weight trained, and the other person, they didn't really do much. And they're like, oh, see, they kept the same amount of muscle. So it's, you know, I think a lot of people get confused with that. You know, I think with the scare tactics of like, oh my God, you're going to get cancer if you're eating A, B, and C. A lot of people have migrated to try vegan vegetarian type diet. And listen, if you love it and you feel good on it and it works well for you, run with it. It just, you know, the only thing I would say with like a vegan vegetarian diet is making sure that you're getting enough protein, and you could do it through, you know, certain types of beans and lentils and chickpeas, but it also adds a lot more carbohydrates, right? Yep. So now if you have someone who's sedentary, they're eating a healthy vegan vegetarian diet, but they have a ton of carbohydrates and they're sedentary and they're not really using them. With any diet, if your calories are too much or you're having too many carbohydrates that you're not really using, probably not going to see any weight loss. So, you know, and then you also have the high chance for some muscle tissue loss. Yeah.
And I think for me, and especially, I would say more so for girls, but a lot of girls that I know that are on a vegan diet that are also working out and trying to build muscle and lose fat, it's so much harder for them to build muscle and lose fat because I get the same feedback every time where it's like, I don't understand. I'm working out so hard and I'm running every day and I'm training every day, but like nothing, it's been 2 years and nothing's changing. And going back to like you're stepping over 3 times to pick up the quarter, by eating vegan, whatever reason you have to eat vegan, whether it's you feel healthier or if it's because you want to protect cute animals, whatever it is. I mean,
if it's ethical, like I get it. Like,
my just thing is you can't have the best of both worlds, and you can't be vegan and also be optimized for optimal
you
performance.
just have to be a little bit more precise with it, and you're going to have to you're going to take that diet and you have to hone in to make sure you're still getting your protein, your carbs, your fats.
And you're also got to take 17 supplements.
Well, it's one of the biggest things with vegan vegetarian is like B12, iron, especially for a lot of females, because you're not getting it from the animal base. I'll tell you firsthand, my business partner, his wife was vegan vegetarian, a little bit of pescatarian. She'd throw some fish in there. She's an animal lover. She did it more for the ethical reasons for years. And I kept telling her, and she was perfect example. She goes to the gym. She's physically active. She's chronically tired. And I'm like, listen, just add a little bit of animal protein in there. I was, so she did like 2 years ago, and within like months, her physique changed. Her energy levels changed. And now, like you talked to her, she's like almost all carnivore. I'm like, well, we got to find balance between the two, but it was so drastic watching her composition change by doing nothing different other than adding a little bit more, more animal-based protein in there, better amino acid profile. And there's ways to fill the gap. Like I said, you could use like, they got great vegan, vegetarian, like plant-based proteins, pea protein, making sure, but once again, per body composition, you're going to make sure you got to work off the difference.
Yeah. And I think what you said about some common things that I find when talking to vegan people is that lack of energy, lethargic, lack of body composition, struggling to gain or lose weight or just change your composition at all. So there's definitely pros, there's definitely cons. My question then for vegans, if someone that's watching this is a vegan and they're going through some of these struggles, what are some supplements that they can add into the diet to help their performance?
So either a good methylated B vitamin, or you could do an injection of vitamin B. Usually for females, if they're still getting menstrual cycles and they bleed every single month, making sure you're kind of getting some iron. So I personally like Ferrocell, which is from Designs for Health. Really, it's like a ferrous chelated iron. That's a good way to kind of get the iron up, and they'll feel better, have more energy. So those are probably the two main ones. And then just making sure you're hitting your protein requirements. If you're worried about body composition, you got to get protein.
Yeah.
So
we are gonna do additional episodes on each of these diets. We'll go even way more in depth and break down like specific meals and ways to add things in and take things out to help. For today, we're gonna stay a little high level, but just to recap the vegan diet. So what?
And just so you know, we're not knocking any one diet.
No,
I'm probably I try to mix and match different things at different points depending on what my goal is. Once you understand, once again, reverse engineer it. What is your goal? 2, find a plan that you actually enjoy, types of foods that you enjoy, and then try to find how can you fit them to your goal. Because if you do something so far away from what you're typically going to do, which what happens with a lot of these diets, like people go from all carbs to no carbs. It's like, and it's not sustainable. Yeah. You got to find balance in all of it. So, it's find the plan that fits you, your health history, your lifestyle, your goal, and then tweak it to kind of make sure you're just thinking about the things that you're lacking and fill the gaps on it.
And I think to make a point of what we talked about last week was, when you're working out and you're training, like you can see results and you can be like, okay, I'm doing X and I'm getting Y. This is working. There's a struggle there when it comes to nutrition because you can be eating a certain way, but you don't really know, is this the best way for me to eat? So I guess my tip, and let me know what you think, would be just base it off how you feel. Like if you're on a vegan diet, but you are lethargic and you're tired all the time and you don't sleep well and you can't change your body composition, maybe it's not for you. Maybe try something else. And I think there's so many diets out there.
Well, that's where you can marry some of them, right?
Yes.
And so like maybe you are predominantly a good base of your diet's 60, 70% vegan vegetarian, but you do sprinkle in the other things that you still like, that still will help support your goal.
So we can use this to transition into kind of diet 1B, which is going to be, if you are a vegan and you are going through these symptoms, I think a good way to start feeling better is transitioning to a pescatarian diet.
Yep.
So if you're a vegan for ethical reasons, I don't know where you draw the line on how cute an animal has to be. But
it's just fish. It's
if
fine.
we can get fish in there, let's talk a little bit about the pescatarian diet. Yeah. Maybe what are some pros that you can get by adding fish in as a vegan?
So, I mean, some of the pros, you're going to get a little bit better protein, a little bit more protein with less carbohydrates. Even my partner's wife, when she was kind of contemplating the transition for her was, let's add just a little bit better protein sources. Fine. You don't want to. You like the furry animals? Cool. Let's go to the ugly fish.
The scaly ones.
So let's get the ones that are kind of slimy and gross. And I really care. I'm not a big fan of the things in the sea.
Yeah.
I think tainted from Jaws. And so so she started adding some fish and I saw the change. She saw the change, but it still wasn't enough. And once she started adding in meats is where she really kind of took off. But that's not for everyone.
For the people that are not going to eat the meats.
Pescatarian, it's going to give you a little bit better protein quantity and type of protein. You're still going to have some gaps you're going to have to fill in it. So
I do want to touch on that quick too.
But you could add omegas. That's a deficiency with being vegan vegetarian is not much omegas or omega fats, which is great for inflammation, cognitive function, brain health, you name it. So that's a great way to fill the gap with the omega side of things. Or take an omega supplement. But
what I want to double tap on what you just said is there is a difference in quality of protein, right? So, if you want to believe it or not, the protein you get from your chickpeas is not the same protein you're going to get from beef.
It's not going to have the same amino acid profile. And one of the bigger, like leucine, isoleucine, valine, those are kind of essential aminos. Those are kind of the true building blocks, like leucine, data after data showing that it helps with muscle repair, muscle growth. And a lot of times, you can't get that from not having any type of other protein sources. So if you are a vegan, you're willing to add some fish in your diet, it's definitely better for you. Definitely get some higher quality protein. It's not maybe the solution, but if that's what you're willing to go as far as fish, do it. It's better than nothing. And I think that kind of encompasses, I don't want to go too deep into these yet since we're going to break them down. So moving off of pescatarian / vegan diet, keto. Yeah. So ketogenics been around forever. Dr. Atkins was like probably the one that made it most famous. Ketogenic diet, if you look at what they say is the guidelines, it's a high fat diet, a moderate protein diet, and then very little to no carbohydrates. A ketogenic diet has benefits by you eating more predominantly protein, fats. You end up getting glycogen.
So you're telling me if I eat more fat, I'm not going to get fatter?
Well, that's going to depend on your calories, but it's true. Well, so think about it. When you reduce a certain macronutrient, it allows for you to pick the gap up elsewhere, right? Yep. And so I think ketosis or Atkins or, I feel like that type of diet with Atkins took off because people got away from the excessive carbohydrates. They started prioritizing a little more protein. Blood sugar got a little bit better, which is huge when it comes to having like insulin sensitivity and the pancreas working like it should. And once you get carbohydrates out of your system, because our body uses carbohydrates as our primary energy source. So if they're in the system, it's going to use it. When you take them away, if you truly put yourself into ketosis, which, if you're going from carbs to no carbs, takes anywhere from 48 to 72 hours to get kind of depleted. Your muscles get depleted. Your liver glycogen gets depleted. You kind of hit a rock bottom and body's like, hey, don't have carbs. Brain switch over, starts using ketones. How does our body get ketones? It could take fat, burn fat up. When that fat oxidizes, produces ketones. And now our body can use that ketone as a secondary energy source. So lipolysis happens fast, right? So that's, I think, what people were drawn to is they saw a lot more weight reduction. Initially, it's usually just eating less carbs, less water. You lose a crap ton, and then people are like, "Oh, this is working. I'm good," and they keep rolling with it.
I think where the caveat comes in on a keto diet, though, is it's just not sustainable.
Yep.
So you can put yourself in ketosis, and yes, you can lose all this weight, and you might feel good, and because you look good. What comes with that is again the same thing: lethargic.
Yep.
You're tired, and correct me if I'm wrong. If you're going to go into a keto diet and you don't plan to stay keto literally for the rest of your life, it's kind of not worth it, because the second you break ketosis, your body reverts right back to where it was.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do is what happens is people go on a ketogenic diet, and then when they get done, they're like, well, and they go back and they introduce carbohydrates quick and maybe in not controlled amounts. Blood sugar starts going crazy, their cravings go crazy. And then all of a sudden they see some weight gain. You know, for every gram of carb you put in, you're going to hold 2.7 grams of water. So you kind of shift some water weight. They feel lethargic. They feel almost bad. Some people, it pushes them to just keep eating like crap because like, well, shit, you know, I just blew it. But a lot of it has to do with uncontrolled blood sugar. They didn't ease out of it. They didn't still kind of keep some moderation in their protein, you know, in the diet. They might've went from all back to none.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, with ketosis over the years, it's also, and this is one of the diets that people have turned into, it's ketosis, it works. So I'm going to basically eat all the bacon, the cheese, the fat, and I'm going to lose weight. And initially they might lose weight, but eventually if their calories are still too high, more than what they need, they don't see weight loss. And so, you know, and if you're somebody who's maybe cardiovascular not sound and you're eating a bunch of the shit fat and saturated fat and the trans fat, that could create some problems.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I think most people, like, you probably heard their term, like dirty keto. I do dirty keto. It's basically, they just said, I'm just going to eat the shittiest fat and I'm going to lose some weight, but that 90% of them get stuck at some point because there's no structure to it, I guess. So you could turn any good plan into a bad plan.
So, yeah, I call it a half disciplined.
But I do like, you know, I eat relatively low carb. Usually with ketosis, when your blood sugar gets stable, your mental clarity is a lot better if you have fat in the diet. You're satiated. Protein makes you feel really satiated. Fat helps you feel satiated. So they feel like they have a lot more control over the cravings until they start putting the carbohydrates back in. And that's where people kind of go off the deep end.
Yeah. So what are some of the nutrient gaps that you would have on a keto diet, and how can you fill them?
Usually with ketosis, it's, I would say more is going to come from, because you're still going to get vegetables. You're not going to have hardly any fruits or fructose unless you do a modified ketogenic plan. You know, making sure you're filling the gaps on some of the, you know, the vitamins and minerals that you get from fruits and vegetables. It depends on the vegetables you're not eating. A lot of times with ketosis, you go more leafy green. So you get a good amount of fiber, but you do lack some vitamins. So just a good quality multivitamin to replace. I actually use a liquid multivitamin just because you're not getting a lot of the antioxidants that come from certain berries and whatnot. So yeah, definitely, you know, making sure like still good quality protein, not shit protein, having good quality fats, not shit fat, if you're going to do a healthy ketogenic plan, and then just make sure you have a good, like a multivitamin to fill the gaps on that.
Yeah. So some of the pros of the ketogenic is, yes, it is good for quick weight loss. Can have some potential cognitive benefits, I would say.
I would say for like, and then if you want to apply it to a certain person, for someone trying to lose fat, it works really well.
Yeah.
For someone who's trying to perform at their peak, not so much, right, because, you know, glycogen is our gas for the muscles to fuel and to be able to do what they need to do. So a lot of people who are physically in the gym, they feel constantly trained. You don't get muscle pumps. You just feel like, if you're an endurance athlete, good luck, man. Your gas tank's already running on fumes. Even though you do have some fat, it's just, you're not going to perform the same way. So I would say that's one of the biggest ones with ketosis. Just be ready to not perform at your best. But if you're not trying to train for something in particular, it's a great tool to fix blood sugar, lose some fat, and control cravings. And that'd probably be like my main reasons for doing that.
And then cons would just be, it can crash performance. And unfortunately, it is very hard to sustain.
Yep.
Going into the next one then, which is one of my favorites, because I feel like everybody I hear that does this does it wrong.
Yeah.
So intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
So I think is a very common misconception that I feel like how a lot of people do, like especially like my age people that come to me and they're like, oh, you know, I'm fasting. I'm like, oh, you know, how are you fasting? And it's always that, like, I just skip breakfast.
Yeah.
So I just start eating at 12. It's like, okay, well, what do you eat from 12 to 8? So people think just because you skip the breakfast, then they can eat whatever they want from 12 to 8. And then it completely takes away the point of fasting, which is just going to be to lower your calories.
Yep.
Right.
Well, you just said it right there. Why have a lot of these diet plans have gotten kind of notoriety for being better for certain things or weight loss, they restrict one macronutrient here and there, which in turn, if you do it right, restricts calories, which is going to allow fat loss or weight loss, right? So with intermittent fasting, there's multiple ways to intermittent fast. There are, depending on what your goal is you're trying to accomplish from it. Intermittent fasting could be, you could do a 20 to 22 fast and eat one meal a day. That's been a big one for so long. You have, the way I prefer, if people do it, a 16-8 method. You might fast for 16, and we'll kind of break it down real quick, not too crazy deep, but a 16-8 method, you could do a 5-day eating schedule, 2-day fast, just to give the gut a break, kind of clear out the gut, decrease some inflammation. Because there are some benefits not putting food in the gut to allow it to process what's there. But what I feel with intermittent fasting, people have taken that plan and they've made it fit what they want to do. Most people have fell into the habit with life of not eating breakfast, maybe not eating lunch. And they're like, well, shit, this plan's perfect for me. I'm going to not eat till 7 o'clock at night, and I'm going to eat from 7 to 9. I'm just going to eat whatever the hell. And they initially see results. And that's where kind of people kind of like, all right, cool, this plan's badass, because they cut back from eating multiple times a day or eating some shit through the day and having too many calories. And initially they see the drop, but then eventually the body would regulate to what you're doing. And so if you're not eating the right stuff in the time you should be eating, sometimes your body can only process so much at one time. And then the quality of the nutrients you're getting. So now they're getting crap nutrients, there's deficiencies there, and they have not many calories. And then, even furthermore, if you're someone who's trying to be physically active, perform, you're a strength trainer, you're a triathlete, like your gas tank's empty.
And I just want to make the point of bringing it all the way back is it's about skipping a meal. Like intermittent fasting is skipping a meal, skipping breakfast. If you skip a meal and then you eat 10 meals from 12 to 8, you completely destroy the idea of intermittent fasting, because again, I think where people get lost is all diets is calorie surplus, you will gain weight. Calorie deficit, you will lose weight. So these are all just different ways to do that. And you can't just say, hey, I'm not going to eat breakfast and this is going to work for me. But then you eat a meal at 12 and 1 and 3 and you're eating Chipotle or Chick-fil-A. It's like, doesn't work like that. And I think that's the biggest misconception with intermittent fasting.
Yeah. That's kind of why I've always migrated. I'm not opposed to intermittent fasting if it fits the person's schedule. You never want to do anything that works against or shoots yourself in the foot. Like if you're someone who trains in the morning, you plan on fasting till lunch, I probably won't recommend intermittent fasting, or you might change your fasting time. I personally like a 16-8 method, still get maybe 4 meals in. And I always kind of say like 12 o'clock, 2:30, 5, 7:30, still portioned meals, still enough calories to, if you're still trying to lose enough to kind of make sure you're in a deficit, but not a super deep deficit. Or if you're trying to still build, make sure we're in a good surplus, get the right amount of nutrients in, protein, carbs, and fat, depending on the goal and the timing, and then shut it back down. And you still get that gut benefit, the autophagy that happens,
But for specifically on autophagy, wouldn't that be, you wouldn't really hit autophagy on intermittent fasting?
Not with the 16-8. So usually you see a lot of that, like if you're doing like once a year, I do like a 3-day fast.
Yep.
I usually kick the start the year off with one just to kind of clear out the gut, kind of get rid of some of the senescent cells. There are tons of benefits if you look, but most of that's going to happen from 48 to 72 hours.
And again, another huge misconception where people come to me like, I'm intermittent fasting, I'm killing the dead cell, like the cancer cells, the dead cells. It's like, you're not though, because what is the rule of thumb? Like 18 hours before autophagy kind of kicks in?
It's kind of starts ramping up.
But then like really when it kicks in is when you're on your back half, when you're in your 48 to 72.
That last day, and then there becomes a point where it's like, if you fast too long, you're going to just kind of slow your metabolism down. And that's why I do it once a year. Usually once every 3 months, I do a 48-hour fast. But I don't train during that time. I hydrate really good during that time. I kind of use it as a time to just recovery, maybe do some mobility work, get some massage. But I try not to stay physically active just so I'm not working against what I'm trying to do. Because a lot of times if I feel like the world undereats too a lot of the times, but they're putting in the work. They're going to the gym and they're wondering why shit ain't happening, because they're literally kind of body's like, I don't have enough to support what I'm doing. I don't have enough to replenish what I did. And you kind of get almost, you might not go backwards, but you're not going forward because you're kind of stuck in stalemate.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to tap on intermittent fasting specifically is the idea of the 1 meal a day. What you said earlier about it, which I want to point out, is your body can only absorb a certain amount of nutrients per meal. So to the people that want to eat this 1 meal a day and still train and do all that, can you speak to that a little bit and why?
I mean, once again, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. I always say this, but like, are there better, more efficient ways? You know, having smaller increments of food coming in so your body has a chance to break down and process it and be able to get more out of it versus just bombarding your system all at once. You know, and I feel like that sets a lot of people up over time, the 1 meal a day. And I can't tell you, like, every single day for the last 20 years, people are like, hey, I'm doing intermittent fasting and I've been doing it and it was great for the first month, but now I'm not seeing results. And like the body is adapted to what they did, or they're eating too much at the time they do eat, or they're eating the wrong stuff when they're starting to eat. And it's like, you know, one, just figure out your goal. Once again, if that schedule works for you, let's find a way to make that schedule good, but also make sure that you're doing it the right way so you're getting the most out of it. You're not just doing it because it fits and you could just eat like an asshole one time a day.
Yep.
So
plenty of pros and cons to intermittent fasting as long as you're doing it correctly. Intermittent fasting is great if you're looking for autophagy. If you're looking for those secondary benefits that's going to come in your later hours, you're going to have to push for a 48 to 72 hour fast. If you are just doing it to kind of restrict calories, I think the 16-8 is the perfect
I think that's a perfect, because it gives you 4 points to eat, still get in a balanced diet.
Every 2 hours between 12 and 8.
I think that's the best way to do it, so you're not setting yourself up to start binge eating. That's the common thing I've seen, that like the uneducated person who goes on it because that fits what they do already and it makes them feel better about what they're already doing, but they're still not getting results from it. Eventually it'll set them up to kind of start going backwards. So, you know, just if you're going to do it, know a better, healthier way to do it, and then fill the gaps on what you're not getting. You know, a big one with that still is adding a supplement when it comes to like vitamins and whatnot. If you're not having vegetables, you make sure you get some like a greens powder to replace the phytonutrients. Make sure you add some fiber if you're not eating vegetables, because some people can only eat so much in that 1 meal too. I don't like it personally. So.
So next up would be the paleo diet.
Yep.
I don't even know what a paleo diet is, to be honest.
So paleo diet, actually over the last probably 10 years since CrossFit was ginormous. You know, that was kind of like what they considered is the best, healthiest type diet. Really paleo, mainly in the carnivore community, or not carnivore community, but the CrossFit community.
Interesting. Is that just because it's anti-inflammatory?
Yeah, anti-inflammatory, less processed foods. You know, try to limit the extra ingredients, more quality proteins, quality fats, quality carbohydrates if you're going to have them. Pretty much cutting out all the refined crap. You know, and obviously I like CrossFit. You know, to each his own. It's too hard. I don't want to do it. So, but when it comes to like the nutrition side, I mean, it's a healthy plan, but also too, I think it sets people up to get too neurotic about certain things.
The orthorexia.
Yeah, orthorexia.
So paleo is just cutting out processed foods completely, going full whole foods, healthy.
Yep.
And then the cons to that is that opens you up to the orthorexia, which is
because you get to a point where you're like, well, shit, what can I eat?
Right.
Like, well, this has that and that has this. And so I feel like some people take it too far. And that's typically, I would say the common person that probably falls into orthorexia would be the neurotic paleo person.
The CrossFit person. Yeah.
Not saying the CrossFit, but
no, but seriously, so paleo, that would be, out of everything we went through, would you say that would be the most healthy?
I would say it's one of the healthier plans. Yeah. Listen, if you could go towards more whole foods, less processed shit, like that's the goal. Yeah. You know, but you still got to live your life. Like, you know, you can't just sit there and, unfortunately, in the world we live in, the processes, you know, of food and us be able to have certain things or convenience. Like if you're not planning with that plan, like It's hard.
It's tough.
Yeah.
So basically then a good tip would be go paleo, but go paleo 80-20.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can eat paleo 80% of the time.
Or go Mediterranean.
So that's
the next one.
Let's just transition to Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Then I feel like, especially as my fitness journey, Mediterranean diet has always been like the staple of what people say of what a healthy diet
The
should look
universal
like.
Healthy diet.
Yeah. So let's talk about what is Mediterranean diet.
So Mediterranean diet was kind of based around people that live around the Mediterranean Sea. A lot less, more whole foods, proteins, having beef and fish and obviously limited chicken and eggs, but still has it in there. More like yogurts and cheeses, less processed crap, but still
no red meat.
They have some that you could put in. It depends on, once again, you can modify it, but it was a lot more fish and like chicken, turkey, a lot more vegetables, a lot more nuts, seeds, just overall pretty healthy diet. But not sitting there getting neurotic on the additives.
So would a potential con of a Mediterranean diet is it seems it would be pretty carb heavy?
It can be. And that's one of the things, like, depending on how, what you're doing with your, once again, I always say, like, with any plan is try to get your protein requirements first, figure out what that is. And then you fill the gaps with carbs, or you fill the gaps with fats, or you fill the gaps with a little bit of both, so you're able to kind of have a good balanced diet. I just think more people, if you're not prioritizing protein in there, you tend to have a lot more carbohydrates, which kind of, if you're trying to like lose some fat, you got to put in a little bit more physical activity to make it happen.
But you would say from a standpoint of longevity and heart health,
heart health, cardiovascular, probably one of the best plans.
Yeah.
A lot of cardiologists recommend it.
Do you think, could that be because that diet has been studied more than the rest? Or do you think No,
I just think with like the available food choices that are considered for that, and like obviously tons of olive oil, I just feel like the food choices allow for a better body composition. And so just having less fat, more muscle, better metabolic rate, lower circulating, because you're not having to refine like sugars or anything like that. So keeping your blood sugar in check, which is, we all know that uncontrolled sugar feeds inflammation. Inflammation feeds cellular dysfunction. Cellular dysfunction feeds diseases in general. So, I'm a big fan of trying to get the circulating blood sugar, in control or down. And that has a slew of health benefits.
Yeah. I feel like people in that part of the world are generally way in better shape than Americans too. So, and
like I said, some of the, like a lot of fish, they do a ton of fish there, which
it's pescatarians.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, they're, I'm pescatarian then, but yeah, I would say that out of all the plans, that they truly consider that the universal healthy diet.
Yeah. So then last but not least, I think would be our favorite.
Yeah.
Probably the hardest to stick to though, in my opinion, which is the carnivore diet.
Man, I would argue, I think it depends on the person and what you like.
Yeah.
Right. So like, if you tell me, man, Jeff, you're into vegan, I'm like, this is going to be difficult. But carnivore, carnivore has its carnivore, whole, what is it? Cult, I guess. I like carnivore personally, just cause I like eating red meat. I do quite a bit of beef, ton of eggs. Carnivore is going to be a more animal-based protein diet. You don't really have any vegetables. It's which will make it, between vegetables and taking fruits out, it's very low, like a FODMAP type diet. Cause you're going to reduce some of the FODMAP things that cause gas and bloating. I would say most people that do a carnivore diet feel like they feel really good because their digestion is better, less bloating, less inflammation.
Yeah.
But I think you got to look at the person. If you're somebody who's got already severe cardiovascular disease that's already progressed, you got to be a little bit careful because you already got some damage done. If you're going to go carnivore and you're going to be eating like the worst cuts of meat and you're going to eat complete shit fat, just like people do with, once again, every plan could be good or bad. I think you could make it a good carnivore plan, but I think a lot of people tend to want to migrate to the better tasting, the better, per their liking, I guess, food choices. But carnivore is for me, it's a great plan. I feel great on it. Energy levels are good. Blood volume stays pretty good. Iron content, tons of minerals from, especially if you're doing like organ meats. I do a more modified carnivore keto. So I'd like to add some vegetables into that. And then I'll tell you, with any type of dieting, you know, if you're trying to diet or if you're trying to kind of lose weight, all these plans have some deficiency in them when it comes to performance, especially for someone on a weight loss cycle. Knowing when to kind of refeed your system. And unfortunately, sometimes you might have to break that dieting cycle for a period of time to be able to kind of put glycogen back into the system to support yourself. Because if not, you tend to run with a half empty gas tank, because you don't have, with carnivore, just like keto, you don't have a lot of glycogen. You don't have a lot of carbohydrates. And so your performance, I think people feel pretty good with carnivore, but after a certain length of time, you start feeling gassed.
Would you recommend for someone that is doing a carnivore diet, would you recommend like a seed to kind of combat gut health stuff? Yeah.
So seed, I would, just for the gut microbiome. I think everybody, I don't care what type of diet you do, you need to make sure your gut's in a good spot. So like seed, which is a pre and probiotic, just make sure you have good gut flora. With carnivore, since it is restricting vegetables, making sure you're not getting phytonutrients. So adding a good quality, like a green supplement to be able to fill the gap there if you want, which some people say, well, that's not true hardcore carnivore. For me, it's like, I'll do the general style, but let's fill the gaps. You know,
and you wouldn't recommend carnivore for like an endurance athlete, because again, you need those carbs.
Yep. Absolutely. I wouldn't, but you know, someone who's,
so who would a carnivore diet, what type of person would a carnivore diet be? I mean,
someone who's just generally trying to live healthier, someone that's trying to keep a good amount of muscle tissue, live a lot leaner, not really necessarily based on performance. Like I have to hit a race and be able to go for a certain time, or if I'm trying to PR a certain lift, probably not
but to cut fat, to reduce inflammation, to overall become leaner. You're getting way better protein, easier to hit your protein goals on a diet like that. So I think there's a lot of pros. There are cons too. You know, you're not getting vegetables, you're not getting micronutrients as much. But I think it's just important to note that each of the diets that we went through has its pros, has its cons. You have your deficiencies. It's just a matter about being smart, filling them where you can with supplements, and just kind of picking the one that fits your lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, just like, having a plan that you like, the food choices you like, and learn how to find balance in all of it. You know, I always say balance, but it's truly, when you could do that with your food, it becomes really simple.
We are going to, like I said in the beginning, we're going to break down each of these a little bit more in depth. We'll do about 20 minutes on each, the pros, the cons, kind of give you some meals, really work through it on what is the best diet for you at this time. But for now, we wanted to keep it high level. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below, like, subscribe, and we will see you next week.